Joining us on the phone, Harvard law professor and blogger for Newsmax, Alan Dershowitz. And joining us in studio, Javier Manjarrez, managing editor of Shark Tank. The website again is
shark-tank.com.
All right. Javier, good to have you spell that out. And let us begin with the esteemed Professor Dershowitz. Alan, thank you so much for
having me.
Calling us in this morning, calling us about this. Right now, with what's going on, Israel calling up more reservists, are they going to just complete this mission against Hamas, or will they still possibly listen to the notion of a ceasefire?
Well, they've agreed to at least 5 ceasefires, but they've conditioned the ceasefire on their ability to destroy the tunnels. Now, I was in the tunnel about a month ago. I was taken by the head of the Southern Command into a tunnel that Israel had recently discovered. It was just yards away from a kindergarten with 57 children who were the targets of this tunnel. And no democracy could ever allow enemies who are sworn to kill Israeli civilians to tunnel under their border and come and put in danger thousands and thousands of Israelis. There were probably 200 exits to these tunnels, all in all. And if you imagine 5 or 6 terrorists in each tunnel, and they pick one day, they could destroy all of South Israel. Some of the tunnels are right underneath schools, kindergartens, synagogues, and other areas of vulnerable civilians. So, of course, Israel has to neutralize the tunnels, or the international community could agree to demilitarize Gaza, including the tunnels, and then Israel would, of course, no longer need to defend its borders that way.
Javier, we've just heard a very passionate and knowledgeable defense of what Israel is trying to do from Professor Dershowitz. And yet, back here at home, it appears now there are fissures within the liberal community. One recent column in a magazine said Israel's actions make it difficult to defend Israel. Are we going to see domestically here, Javier, more of a schism on the left in terms of support of Israel?
Well, we've seen it all along. For years, every time Israel enforces their will on Hamas, again, Hamas starts with using human shields. You see more death and destruction on the side of the Palestinians. So people jump down the throats of the Israelis, and hey, they need to push back. More ceasefires. Obama will get involved. You're going to see that. You're going to see demonstrations like we saw in Miami this past weekend. We saw Hamas supporters coming out and threatening Israelis with death. Another videographer from Tom Trentro's group. You're going to get more and more as this war progresses.
Alan, what is transpiring now in terms of American public opinion and the actions of the administration? Is there a situation where pressure increases on Israel to accept a ceasefire no matter the conditions?
I think there's a little bit of that, and I think the administration is making a terrible mistake when they say, I think they mean it as a cliche, when they say that Israel ought to do more to protect Palestinian civilians. No, Hamas ought to do more to protect Palestinian civilians. Hamas purposely did not build shelters for their civilians. There's a photograph circulating now of a father, a Hamas member, tying his children to the front of a building to use them as human shields. Even the most recent incidents where UN facilities have been attacked, the UN facilities have been used by Hamas, both to store weapons, also to booby trap and kill Israeli soldiers. And when Hamas is shooting from UN areas, and the choice is between shooting back and protecting your soldiers and risking some Palestinian civilians, or allowing your soldiers to be massacred by fire, any democracy, any country, the United States, certainly would protect its soldiers and its civilians. And there's one more myth out there that must be destroyed, the myth that Gaza is so dense that Hamas must fight from within highly populated areas. As we're speaking, I'm looking right now at a density map of Gaza. I've been in Gaza. There are numerous open areas in Gaza, between Gaza City and Deir al-Balam, between Deir al-Balam and Khan Yunis, open areas, miles where there are no people at all. Any decent army would be firing its rockets, if they fire rockets at all, from those open areas. Instead, Hamas picks the densest areas of the densest cities from which to fire in order to use the civilians as human shields. Then they complain when Israel, in an attempt to destroy the tunnels and destroy the rockets, inadvertently kills civilians who they are trying to protect. And the public falls for it, and the media falls for it. And I call it the dead baby CNN strategy. Hamas wants to see dead Palestinian babies. Yes, they want to see dead Palestinian babies so they can show them on television and get everybody upset and blame it all on Israel. And if the media keeps doing this, they're going to do it over and over again, and Hamas is going to cause the death of more and more Palestinian civilians.
And that's what's so frustrating. It does seem like an endless cycle. But Professor Dershowitz, we want to turn our attention back home as well on one of the big issues here today, and that's the immigration bill and the debate happening right now on Capitol Hill. Ted Cruz and House Speaker John Boehner are fighting internally in the GOP as far as the immigration bill. How, nobody really thinks this is going to happen here today, but what does this mean for the overall debate moving ahead?
Well, I'm a strong supporter of American immigration. My family all came over. My grandfather, his proudest moment was to bring 29 people on the eve of the Holocaust from our family. I'm sure some of them came illegally. They ended up being very productive members of society. So, you don't have here a sympathetic ear to draconian restrictions on immigration. Ted Cruz is a student of mine. He's a friend of mine. I like him very much. But he reminds me a little bit of that comedian Yakov Smirnoff. Remember him? He was a Russian immigrant, and he had a bit where he's standing in front of the Statue of Liberty and he's saying, thank you, America, for bringing me in and saving me from the communists in Russia. Now I have only one wish to you. And what's that? Keep all the rest of those damn immigrants out. You can't do that. We're a country of immigrants, and we have to be much more sympathetic to reasonable immigration policy into this country. I'm not advocating illegality. I'm just advocating sympathy. And when kids are sent to this country because of desperate needs from abroad, we just have to be a little bit more open and sympathetic. So I'm not in favor either of the Republican proposals, and they're fighting among themselves now.
Well, there's more than fighting among themselves. I tell you what, we've got a couple of minutes left. And Alan, I'm going to let you weigh in on the lawsuit, but I want to get to Javier on one of the immigration questions too. This notion of Speaker Boehner and the GOP suing the president, constitutionally, where do you come down on that?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yes, sir.
Constitutionally, these are show trials. They almost never work. Politics is politics, and the Supreme Court has a doctrine of political question. They don't get involved in political disputes. Clearly the Speaker is using this to try to help him in the election campaign that's coming up. I don't think he has any realistic prospects of success. Executive authority is very broad in the United States and becoming broader. So I don't think the lawsuit has much of a chance to win legally. It has a chance to win politically.
Javier, you may want to make a quick comment on the lawsuit, but there's a question about immigration I want to get to in about the minute and a half we have left. We heard Professor Dershowitz speak very eloquently about children, at the same time saying he wasn't advocating illegality. What is especially vexing are the security questions. New York Times reporting about the Florida man who went to become a jihadist and came back to America before he went to bomb. Now, Javier, how are we able to have a meeting of the minds to understand at long last that border security is national security and immigration policy figures in this?
First of all, I'd like to applaud Mr. Dershowitz for his impersonation. It was pretty good.
Yakov Smirnoff, that was good.
It
that
was
was
good.
a first.
I disagree with him on that there's some kind of draconian measure going on as far as immigration reform. But you're right. This is a national security issue. This is not about just immigration reform. You mentioned this terrorist. Who knows who's coming across this border? We don't know. It's a porous border on both the northern and the southern border. We don't know what's happening. We don't know who's coming across. That's why we need to enforce existing laws. Nothing more. Everyone is for immigration. For my parents, like Mr. Dershowitz's parents, came here legally. They were legal immigrants from South America. So everyone can speak to that.
Javier, we appreciate your insights here. Professor Dershowitz, we're going to ask you to extend your lecture session or the discussion portion of class just a little bit following
that. By the way,
break.
I agree
Yes.
it's a national security issue.
Good. Well, perhaps we ought to prioritize the enforcement issue. Tell you right now, we're going to step aside for a second. When we come back, the question about Secretary Kerry. A House committee chair said it was time for him to go. We'll see what Alan Dershowitz thinks and also John Gizzi of Newsmax.com. That's straight ahead when America's Forum comes right back.